And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Benched with Bubba, episode 636. Going to wrap up the American League, the AL West of the team by team previews for the 2024 fantasy baseball season. In order to do so, we're talking some Seattle Mariners baseball, a team that got to the dance last year, came up short, but got a lot of expectations in the Pacific Northwest with the pitching staff, with J-Rod and company. So help me preview their 2024 season. He's returning from last year's preview show. We've had him on other episodes of Bench with Bubba, episodes of Bubba and the Bloom. You guys know him at RotoWire, Baseball HQ. Does a ton of football work as well, which I probably miss half of those places if they're out there. But he's a busy man at all times. You can find him on Twitter at Corbin_Young21. Corbin Young, how you doing, my friend?
I'm good. Yeah, much better from earlier in the week. Thanks for being flexible. And yeah, too much going on right now, but football postseason's winding down here, so we gotta pick up steam on that other sport.
Yeah, that other sport. I've seen you tweeting a little more about it, so I can tell you're starting to get into it. You had an article come out at RotoWire recently, so I think you even had an HQ article, I think, or maybe
Yeah, one of the first
yeah,
off-season
a
facts and
week
proofs.
or
Yeah,
so ago.
yeah,
Yeah, so you're churning and going here. At least you're getting to that point as football winds down. There's still a couple more weeks, and we're recording right after the Bills Chiefs games. So the conference title games are all set for next weekend. So technically, Corbin has like 3 games left. But he's tweeting college stuff too, so he's getting ready for combines, and it doesn't sleep, my friend, does it?
no, you know how this goes. It's a
Yes.
hobby, and just keeps on going.
Yep. Yep. It's always something. But we're going to talk Seattle Mariners tonight. And before we get into the 2024 stuff, just as someone that like roots for the team and obviously likes fantasy as well, but just more of a rooting aspect, what were your thoughts on how 2023 went down? Were you like really excited about it? Were you still kind of disappointed? How did you feel in the end on that one?
I mean, just the year prior, right? Like even making the playoffs and playing the Astros, like that's it was been way too long. So I mean, the fact that we're coming to this point where we're pushing for playoff spots and stuff like that, but they still come up short, and it seems mostly on the offensive end. So I mean, yeah, as we age, as we get older, I try to be more of a level-headed sports fan,
Yep.
whether it's fantasy or not. Not letting a game or a season kind of ruin my month or week, and just kind of appreciating for what it is. And based on some of the pretty terrible teams before, at least there's some talent and some players to root for
Definitely.
that can give you some excited to watch baseball. And well,
Yeah, if I'm a Mariners fan, I'm pretty pumped on what I saw last year. At least there's some optimism moving forward, and we're going to talk about some of the big pieces of optimism. But there's also some, maybe questionable things we'll discuss as well. And this offseason's been quite interesting. With we always have was dealing to Poto, always trading Jerry, whatever. There's a million nicknames. The dude like had a heart attack and was doing trades from the hospital bed a couple years ago. He's always wheeling and dealing, and it's been an interesting offseason. If you want to go through the litany of moves or you just want to kind of generalize it, it's up to you. Like as a Mariners fan, it felt like a lot of just moving parts with maybe a couple pieces that made sense, but as a whole, it wasn't like a too many major splashes for as many moves that took place, I guess. How do you feel about
yeah, I feel like last year we had this conversation and just kind of look at the roster. It was like there's lacking depth,
it?
and there's like when you're going with Sam Haggerty and Dylan Moore and these guys, and I mean they're still there. It's kind of your, I mean even Jared Kelenic, like it's a kind of hoping that he'd be reliable. It didn't quite happen, but it's kind of lacking depth there. And I kind of look at the roster now, and it's it's just kind of mix and match here and replace something with another thing, right? No Eugenio Suarez, but then we get Mitch Garver. Not that he's the same guy, but kind of replacing like some offensive juice that we need. And
Mhm.
there's some good moves, some pieces that it's like Jose Caballera. I mean, could be a pretty good utility player, but in the end, maybe not necessary. But I'd say about even. I don't know what the like money wise look like. There's all that stuff on social media of just like selling. But
Mhm.
I mean, I think they're also not haven't been trying to give up, players that have a lot of value, right? Like in the previous ownership or general managers and stuff, they've that Adam Jones kind of trade for the Orioles still sticks in my mind. And those kind of moves, right, where you're
Sure.
giving up these talents for like a starting pitcher or something when you're not really. That's not the move you need to make. So I do appreciate them kind of keeping most of the main guys and trying to build around that and see what happens. But
Yeah, that's why it's just whenever I see the moves, I'm looking at it going, okay, it's definitely a baseball related move. He's looking to add depth somewhere. Is this where depth needed to be at? Like, there's a million of those type of scenarios, but like you said, they're not really giving up major pieces that are like game changing pieces to your team at the same time. So that's a promising. So it's one of those like, if why not try to like build somewhere else type thing and see where it works. So we'll see. Time will tell on those. But yeah, just sitting back, you're like, well, we're doing something, but are we doing something? And that's, hey, it's better than the Giants. Okay, we aren't doing anything. So like, there's that. Let's talk about some of these key players though. We'll start with the bats, and the first few are pretty kind of self-explanatory, but we'll talk about them for sure. And we'll start with the main one. He's basically the third overall pick in the NFBC draft champions right now over the last like since January 1st, basically. His ADP is 2.7. He's going right behind Bobby Witt. He's got as high as 2, as low as 4. He's pretty much supplanted into the number 3 spot. That's J-Rod. Julio Rodriguez, great sophomore season with the Seattle Mariners. We saw him improve to a 32-37 with 102 runs, 103 RBIs at 275. Monster second half, as we all know from paying attention. It's ridiculous second half. But what's your thoughts on J-Rod now? It's like this will be year 3. We've seen him, do really well. At the same time, it might not be peaking because he's going to be, 23 years old, for crying out loud. So, what's your thoughts on J-Rod?
yeah, I mean, I was trying to look at some of the notes last year, right? Like a lot of the concerns were like too many ground balls and maybe a little lucky in the home run per fly ball department. But he still hits the ball really hard. Pretty much at near elite barrel rates, exit velocities on fly balls and line drives. So there might be some concerns around the plate discipline, chasing a little bit more than the league average, not necessarily making as much contact. But it's just, and then it's still looking at it again, this, 2023, it's the same idea, right? Ground balls, a little efficient in home run fly ball, chases a little more. He did make a little more contact in the zone. I think that's maybe a little bit of indication that he also swings a little more. So sometimes we see that in guys like Boba, or another one was like Von Grissom I was looking at when there was that trade, right? Some of these guys that are like, I think they're pretty good hitters. They swing a little more than, and they're not being as passive, so it may look like they're chasing a little bit, but they're also making decent amount of zone contact as well. So I think that might be giving an indication to us in the kind of the hit tool that Rodriguez has, an ability to make contact, even with a more aggressive approach. And I put on something in a note here. I mean, I think he's one of the few players, him and Bobby Witt, that could probably push for that, $60 season that Ron Acuna put up, or at least like put up like a pretty outstanding season, like where we just can't believe it. And I think he's just one of those players that, you know, based on how you start, I mean, you can't go wrong with him, or Bobby Witt, or whatever you're picking at too, right? So
Yep. We're 100% on the same page. Like I said it on the Royals show with Kevin Hastings that, Witt's technically number 2, but like I said too, his is like a 2.63 ADP and J Rod's is 2.67. So literally it probably is almost an even trade of who gets picked second type scenario. And the thing you said though that I 100% agree is with Witt and now you got J Rod, both are so young still, like really young. There could be a whole nother level, which is scary to think about. And like you said, there goes the Acuna type season we saw. And I don't know if we'll ever see the Acuna, but like you said, Acuna was like a $75 player, 60 still like lights out. You don't see very often stuff. Acuna was just that crazy last year. So I'm with you there.
yeah, and I feel like we had similar conversation with Acuna, a few years back, right? Like too
Yep.
many ground balls or chasing a little bit too much, and sometimes I think we get into this habit of overanalyzing a little bit when there's someone that's just really
100%.
talented. So
Sometimes just trust the talent and see where it goes from there type thing. One of the acquisitions you did make this past offseason was Mitch Garver coming to the Mariners, set up to DH for the most part. We know Garver, when healthy, and that's always kind of the thing with Mitch Garver, tons of power. He had 19 home runs in 87 games last year, hit 270, which is pretty good for him, actually. But all things considered, he, pretty solid ball player to put in the middle of your order as a DH, could catch if necessary. So What's your thoughts on him? His ADP is 185 right now, so not costing you much.
Yeah, I was kind of when there was like rumors about Mitch Garver signing and then getting him, I was kind of texting back and forth with Dave Swan about him, and we're just like, I mean, I just kind of like the move, right? We're looking for offense, right? The Mariners looking for offense, and that's what Garver gives, right? He matches. Health can be a concern. Like I was just trying to look at plate appearances. Like he hasn't had 400 plate appearances, so it's like that could be a concern. It sounds like he'll probably DH, maybe give Cal Raleigh a day off here and there. But he has kind of the skills that we look for in some power hitters, right? He has really, really good play discipline. He doesn't really chase. He hits the ball really hard. He's got a career 142 XPX. That's kind of the expected power metric that Baseball HQ uses, with 100 being average. So he hits the ball really, really hard. And he might not have the ceiling of Cal Raleigh, but he's kind of just I think like a cheaper version, right? Just might hurt you in batting average, hits the ball really hard. Kind of a discount Cal Raleigh to say.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. Just like you said, if he ever could just stay on the field, there's like legit 35 home runs in that bat.
Right.
It's crazy. He's just got to stay out there, but not a bad option, especially if he just DHs. Hopefully, stays out of some injury concerns in that regard. Speaking of Cal Raleigh, the big dumper, he's coming in with an ADP of around 135 right now. And what was great about last year is, in 2022, he had the 27 homers, 211, kind of the breakout year. The first year he's the main starter, and people were like, it's great. The power's good. The average could hurt, prove it type thing. He comes back and hits 30 home runs in 2023 with a 232 average. And that 232 average, you can work with a catcher with power like that. So what's your thoughts on Mr. Raleigh here as he enters his age 27 season and looks to be a legit power source behind the dish?
Yeah. Again, last year when we did this, I kind of mentioned in the forecaster for his Baseball HQ, Cal Raleigh had a XBA that kind of gave us a little more optimism, right? Everybody was kind of worried, like, is he going to hit like 211 or is he going to hit 200 for batting average? I know he doesn't necessarily have the approach that kind of fuels batting average, right? Too much pull heavy fly ball. But again, his XP is a little bit higher because he just destroys baseballs, and he makes enough contact. But like you said, a catcher kind of hitting 230, 240 with 25, 30 home runs is kind of the base. Like, I mean, that's something we're looking for. He's definitely someone that also just like loves to play. Right, there was I think it was like maybe 2 years ago, he like hurt his thumb or something. He's just fighting through. I know it doesn't necessarily push through for like the fantasy purposes. He might have been pretty terrible during that time, but he wants to be on the field, right? He's like, yeah. I think it's you kind of look at that range ADP. You're picking through, a ton of semi-proven guys that we've seen before. So kind of take your pick, but I'd be Raleigh's definitely a priority if you're kind of looking for catchers early, I think.
Catchers early with power. I'm 100% with you on Cal Raleigh. There's something there that I don't have a lot of shares of. I like some other guys a little later, some younger guys. I'll take chances. I've had zero problems with Cal Raleigh. Like I know I do have a couple shares because I draft too much. But let's go to Ty France here. This is an interesting one because I got mixed thoughts on Ty France. It was a very disappointing season. 158 games, only 12 home runs, hit 250. Like the average, we usually expect more. Power, we expect a little more. I know he battled a million injuries because he got hit by pitch like every other game, it felt like. So he's doing that a lot. He's also going to Driveline this offseason, which is a promising thing, which you'll probably hit on as well or something. But what's your thoughts on Ty France? Because this feels one of those, we used to pay not a lot for him, but now it's a 317 ADP. It's really dropping. So if you believe in a bounce back, it could be a nice little gift.
Yeah, Ty France is just a really good hitter. I kind of I'm trying to look back, over the home run totals, and it seems like some of those are a little fluky in like 21, 22, just kind of or a little more lucky, I guess I should say. And that kind of fell off in terms of home run to fly ball rate. So one could argue that maybe it kind of bounces back, but I mean, he's one of those hitters that kind of typically just outperforms. Like the power output is better than the skills. And it can be kind of a red flag, but I think it's just tempering expectations, right? Like not looking for the 20 being the baseline, but more the ceiling. But like you're saying, it's so late that like health permitting, like he's probably just going to eat up plate appearances, and just kind of be in the middle of that lineup. He hopefully you're not going for first base there, but he's
Yeah,
kind of more corner field. But
100%.
I mean, he's kind of just like one of these boring guys that like doesn't really have anything that stands out other than kind of good play disciplines, makes a decent amount of contact, and accumulate some volume and stuff like that. So
Yeah, I'm just wondering if he can find that power source that even in the minors with the Padres, this dude's hit like 30 home runs, and I know as the minors and the PCL is a lot different and all these things, but he's shown like ability to just pound baseballs. So I'm wondering if the whole drive line thing and just not get hit by a million pitches will do something for you, but that's how he stands at the plate. So he's probably gonna be susceptible to it. So that's just another thing to think about. But at the price point, very, very intriguing. JP Crawford, talk about a little renaissance season here from JP Crawford. 145 games played, hit 19 home runs. He has a total of 46 in his career. So do the math on that one real quick. He hit 266 last year, only 2 steals. Not going to run a ton, but the power just kind of blossomed out of nowhere with Crawford. ADP of 267 right now. How are you feeling about JP Crawford? Because I am having a hard time buying into this.
yeah, he's another guy where it's just like good play discipline, right? Kind of falls a similar bucket as Ty France. Yeah, I mean it's hard to really say. Like I think we talked on the forecaster pod with Alan,
Yeah,
and we were talking about like I was like that was just one he didn't believe in. But yeah, he's another guy. I mean, you look at where the power skills lie in the historical past seasons, and it's been pretty awful. And so like, but the output was massive this year, and so it's kind of one of those where it's probably safe to bake in some regression there. I wouldn't expect a home run to fly ball of 12-14%. You're probably bumping that more in the single digits. And that might only give him about like 12 or 15 home runs, but um, he might push for like 100 runs, right? Like if he's going to be up at the top of that lineup, so that's
true.
kind of just like a sneaky thing there. Um, yeah, it's hard to even point like where he's hitting the ball harder. It's just like he hit the ball harder, but it's still like under league average or below. So it's like so so it's like hit the ball harder, but it's not like something where it's like yay. But there's some gains. I just don't think it's going to be like 20 home runs is a likely outcome.
Yeah. Personal improvements, not major league reference improvements,
Yeah,
basically. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it's just one of those. If he could even, if I could think like 15, which I'm not even sure he's got in him, it would help a ton. But the part you mentioned there is the runs. He could legit easily, pretty easily, I think, get 100 runs scored with those OBP skills, and that could be a value in itself, right there. Like as a middle infielder later in drafts, that'd be pretty sweet. So definitely something to keep in mind, at least when you're sitting at that part of the draft. Well, here's a trade with the Giants, and I'm glad he's gone. I didn't want him there in the first place. Mitch Haniger is back in Seattle. Seems like a great guy, so it sounds bad when I say that. But I never was a fan because he just never plays, and he proved it last year for the Giants. Didn't play again, and it's frustrating because there is a hit tool there. I'm not going to deny that. It's just not on the field. He only played 61 games last year, 57 the year before. It's basically been 2 seasons where he's played a regular like amount of games, and then it's just been nothing. So what's your thoughts on Mitch Haniger? Because technically he's projected to start in the outfield for you guys. He's got an ADP of 401, which again, if you tell me he plays 140 games, I'd swipe that up in a heartbeat. But I just don't know if I can trust that.
yeah. Health hasn't been his friend, right? Like I was looking at the IL days. He's missed over 100 games on the injury list in 3 of the
It's
past 4 seasons.
crazy.
That's not great. I'm not including 2020, but it's just so many injuries, right? So it just comes down to health. I feel like his ADP was a lot higher in the past, so it's kind of like
Yep.
if you're just banking on the dip there. I mean, he does hit the ball pretty hard. He does have some pretty good power skills there. Contact rate has dropped on a tiny bit, but he does hit the ball hard enough that I think it could be worth it. But yeah, again, just that late. I mean, I guess you can kind of stomach it a little easier when you're like, well, if I'm going, taking the fourth, fifth outfitter at 400 EP, at least I can just like maybe pick that up on the waiver wire too. But
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. It's real tough. Like I actually want him to do good, but it's just I just have zero chances of believing in that right now. Like I love Luke Raley. Luke Raley you picked up from the Rays. Yeah, Caballero could be interesting. I kind of like it for the Rays. They needed a shortstop. It was going to be a utility for you guys. Could have worked out, but we'll see. I do like Luke Raley. There's some power. There's some speed. Not a great average, but not a horrible average. Can play outfield, first base, kind of move around for you. Looks like he's projected to basically take the Jared Kelenic spot, maybe platoon or something. I don't know all the details there, but you get to pay for an ADP of 322 right now. So, what's your thoughts on Luke Raley? Who I'm just trying to figure out where he fits with Seattle. Is he going to be like the heavy platoon guy and still plays like 130 games, or is it going to be less or more? I don't know. So, what are you thinking when you look at Luke Raley?
Yeah, he's a tricky one, right? Because he kind of profiles like your typical power hitter, and chase a bit more. It doesn't make a ton of contact, but really hits the ball really, really hard. Yeah, I think the speed might be the sneaky part of the game there, right? Like he converted a decent chunk of stolen bases, 82% of the chances. Like many players, he ran a ton last year, right? Like a 24% stolen base opportunities. Um, so that might be something kind of sneaky there. I mean, again, looking at depth, right? I think he's just going to need to play, right? Like if his defense is good enough, I mean, we could run through player scenarios. We just talked about Mitch Haniger, right? Like, oh, Mitch Haniger gets injured. Would that happen? Probably. He slots into an outfield spot there. I really don't think that they have a ton of other depth that's gonna like steal the job. Like Sam Haggerty, Dylan Moore, we've been through that before. Taylor Trammell's kind of interesting. Maybe we'll talk about him a little later, but there's some videos of him working with Driveline and things like that. So, maybe that's a guy that could be kind of sneaky on the outskirts. But I mean, if they're gonna go strict platoon, you're gonna kind of have to monitor that. But again, I think it's one of those guys where it's worth the risk. Like, how many guys are you going to find that hit like 8 to 20 home runs, 12 to 15 stolen bases,
Yep.
And not hurt you? And at least you're going to know that he's going to produce when he's out there. You're probably going to take that around that ADP. So,
100%. I was drafting him a ton in early drafts when he was with the Rays, and he gets traded. I'm like, how's this going to work now? Because I kind of had a blueprint with the Rays where it was good enough, and it was really funny because I had Colette preview the Rays the day before this trade and the other trade. They made two trades. They traded Kittredge to St. Louis for Palacios, both on the same day. And Colette texted me, and we start laughing. But one thing he also said about Rayleigh is it's the speed, like you mentioned, that shocks people because you look at Rayleigh, he's this big dude. Like he looks almost like a fullback or a linebacker or something that you don't expect him, but he can book it. So
yeah,
that's
he's got
nice
that.
nice little added boost to his profile.
Right. He's kind of got that like Alec Boehm build where it's like he could be playing linebacker in the NFL, but he's on the infield or playing the outfield.
Yeah, he's booking, he's moving, so it's fun. Luis Urias, this is I always screw it up. I guess the one's Urias, or Urias is on the other team in LA. Luis Urias, he's coming over, projected to play third base for you guys for now, taking the Suarez role. He's got an ADP of 478. Obviously, a pretty rough, injury-riddled season in 2023. We've seen some good with him. We've seen also, obviously, the ugly. But what's your kind of thoughts, maybe hope for Urias this year?
Yeah, like I kind of liked him in the past, right? Like we've seen this before. We've kind of got sucked in a little bit. I mean, some minor concerns like his powers is average. Sometimes like maybe slightly above average depending on the year, but I mean, he has that pull heavy fly ball approach, so he's really, really trying to tap into that. Unfortunately, I think the Mariners' home ballpark is a little bit less friendly to right-handed hitters, if I recall. So that can be a little bit of a problem. Yeah, I mean, injuries have definitely been an issue. A lot of lower body injuries, like hamstring. I mean, he's probably going to play. Like again, looking at depth, it's like I can't imagine, Josh Rojas stealing that job over there, or Bill Moore or something like that. I mean, there could be something way, way, way late down the road in terms of like some infielders in the minors, stuff like that. But unless they sign somebody there, he's probably going to have to play. He's probably going to gain some third base eligibility. I think he's second base right now. So that might be something to just kind of monitor when that happens. Yeah, when it happens late in the year, he's second base right now. But he's probably just more of a kind of a waiver wire guy. I mean, he's probably going to hit towards the bottom of the lineup, right? So you're going to kind of get less plate appearances there, and he doesn't quite have the kind of stolen base juice there. So, I mean, if he surprises me, yay, maybe the Mariners are doing well, but not a target.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Each play a guy will find on the waiver wires, and you can play that game if you need to at some point in time. I'm not thinking he's going to be a hot commodity in at least 12-team and shallower leagues. Similar to this guy, Josh Rojas. He had a couple weeks last year where it's like, man, I need to roster him, like stream him, see where we can go with it. Then he kind of, did Josh Rojas things: 4 homers, 12 steals overall in the year, hit 245. Did the little pop, but the speed was there. He's second base, third base eligible, which is kind of nice. ADP of 456, which is intriguing. But he wasn't like a hardcore platoon last year. It was straight up like he faced righties and then he sat versus left. There was really no wiggle room there. What's your thoughts on Rojas for 2024, especially at that ADP?
Yeah, again, not super exciting. I can't really find, I think unless you're banking on 20 plus steals, I mean, 15 is probably within reason, but it's hard to really, you know, stomach the rest of that profile. So it's like I could see myself like eventually streaming a guy like Josh Ross. You're like, oh, cool, put his positional flexibility, and he gives me some stolen bases, and he's playing right. Then
Exactly.
then that comes into play, but I wouldn't. It's kind of just like might be one of those overlooked kind of depth born guys, but I don't think he's gonna kind of break. You're not gonna be missing out that you. I mean, unless there's a 2022 all over again where he gets like $20 of value, but if I'm fine if I miss out on that, I guess.
Yep. I'm with you. So literally, it'll be a stream guy from time to time for me. But that's about as far as the Josh Rojas train goes in my world. Anybody else? You mentioned Taylor Trammell. Is there anybody else you want to discuss real briefly that could have an impact? Because with Luke Raley, with Rojas, with a couple guys, there are platoon options where guys could maybe get some at bats and take over.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to talk about Haggerty and Dylan Moore. I feel like we went down that road before.
Yep.
They might give us a week or two there. Yeah, Taylor Trammell's kind of interesting, right? He's going to drive line. He really leaned into kind of the pull heavy fly ball approach as a lefty. He's been about league average in kind of barrels per PAs, but um, he has been hitting the ball a little harder. Again, it's such a small sample. He's hardly played, but he has been hitting the ball a little bit harder the past couple seasons. So if you kind of want to latch on to some of the exit velocity numbers from last year, but though it's not that many events, that might be someone to latch onto. He's kind of been a post, hype sleeper, from the Reds there, but he's a pretty good athlete. I think just keep an eye on him. I think I looked; he doesn't even have an ADP, so again, not even not even a guy to really be considering. But just keep an eye. Probably on the waiver wire or something. He might earn some chance in outfield. With some defense or some other things. So.
And then you have Cade Marlowe down here. I'm glad you put him because it's like Marlowe, Canzone. It's just I just look at them and then I don't know what to do with them. So you got Marlowe on the list, which tells me you like him a little more. So that tells me a lot already. So what do you got on
Yeah,
Cade Marlowe?
yeah, it's just kind of those like cheap power speed guys, right? And
Yep.
strong side platoon. Again, kind of uses that pull heavy fly ball approach. It kind of again leans into that lefty um, power, alley that the Mariners have, but it kind of suppresses a right-handed power. Canzone, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's just a personal bias thing here. I feel like I picked him up last year and he was like okay, so it's like, I was like kind of one of those things where I was kind of getting talked to him because he's got a cool name and some other things, but I don't know. I might need to see a little more.
Yeah.
Um, I just I don't see as much that I want out of there. I'd rather go with Marlowe because I feel like Marlowe's got a little more kind of speed that I can kind of bank on or hope for Jimmy Bond there than someone like Kenzo. So
Yep. I'm kind of with you on that one. I feel the same. I've been leaning more Marlowe throughout my draft season where I do take those late flyers. Let's head to the mound. You kind of said it without outside of J Rod. The fun for Seattle is in that starting rotation. Like it is a top to bottom toy basically because the young guys are working on things on that is fun to watch on Twitter when videos pop out. And then you start with the ace Luis Castillo, who just the whole joke when he got traded, he finally had a Great American Small Park and he delivered. He was outstanding outside of there, and he was still good again last year. 197 innings, which was great to see. 3.34 ERA. Strikeouts are there with Castillo. Right now, ADP of around 29, going right behind Kevin Gossman in the starting pitching world. What's your thoughts on Castillo? Because I'm still a huge fan. He's going to be 31 this year. A lot of like the aces going in front of him are getting more towards the mid 30s to late 30s of the world. So Castillo is technically one of the young guns in those early pitchers that are going.
Yeah, no,
Outside
I
of
like.
Strider, sorry, I got to
Oh
clarify
yeah,
that for anybody who says a
uh,
word
uh,
outside of Strider.
yeah, of course, SP1. You know, you
Yeah.
can't. No, Luis Castillo. I was trying to look back. I think I did his forecaster box in whatever 2023, whatever the year, the book before this year was.
Yeah, I think it was the first
Uh,
year you came on the show. You did have Castillo. Yeah.
yeah, so I really liked what I saw. You know, there was an up projection in there of like 200 innings, 200 strikeout season. He was just shy of that with the innings, but you know, put his second best strikeout total. I just really love the change in approach he's had, where he's kind of moved more towards a four seamer slider. Changeup's kind of taken a back seat a tiny bit in terms of whiffs, but I mean he ranks first in four seamer swinging strike rate, 19th in slider swinging strike rate, 16th in changeup swinging strike rate. Like when you have three pitches that are just above average and illicit whiffs, and he isn't that like whip killer that people have thought of him as before. So he's definitely, I would be happy to kind of take him as my SP1 in second round. Yeah, I'm all about Castillo again. So
Yeah. Big fan as well. It's just tough for me. Like between him and Gossman, I'm always torn. Do you lean Castillo or go? I somehow lean Gossman, but I love Castillo. Like it hurts not picking Castillo when I pick Gossman type thing.
yeah. I mean, it's probably just a coin flip there. I probably just go
Yeah.
Castillo, but you know, it's just kind of more preference there.
That's fair enough because like I said, I look at him, it's like ugh, so tough, so tough. Now we go down to some cheaper or not cheaper, younger arms in the bullpen with Logan Gilbert. He's gonna be 27 this year, but his age 26 season picked up 13 wins, got you 190 innings, which is big, back to back 185 and 190, which you don't see a lot from young guys. Ratios still weren't bad, ADP of 64, and I know he's been tweaking things from time to time. So, what are our thoughts on Logan Gilbert? Because it feels like he's got some nastiness in him, but he just hasn't put it all together yet.
Yeah. I have this, you know, kind of weird theory here. I told a couple people, I said, I have this weird idea. I think I'm just going to draft a ton of Mariners starting pitchers, and draft as many as I can, and just, you know, bank on most of them working out more than not.
That's probably fair.
You know, and so there's just a chunk of them that are really good from command and control perspective, or their stuff just really good. You know, we know the story with Gilbert. He introduced a splitter last year. He mainly threw kind of four seamer slider curveball, kind of not accounting for 90% of the arsenal, at least in 2022. And then 2023, that splitter kind of gave him another pitch for whiffs. You know, I kind of put a note in here. I mean, we probably would have been a little bit off of Gilbert last year, because he only had one pitch with a swinging strike rate above 11% in the slider. And if you look at the league average for sliders, like that's not good. So it's, you know, it's kind of one of those things where it didn't really have a lot of optimism there. Four seamer's been getting crushed, right? It's not necessarily a really good fastball. It kind of made me question like what happened to Gilbert's slider because it bounced back a little bit. I kind of posted this on Twitter the other day, but he threw the slider a little harder, just about a little more than 1 mile per hour, a little bit less spin, and causing it to drop 3 more inches than it did in 2022. So, you know, that would kind of explain the bump in whiffs last year on the slider. Another interesting note on that slider, he throws it in the zone a ton. He throws it, I think, at the highest zone rate on the slider, of all starting pitchers. So that was kind of interesting that he threw it in the zone over 56% of the time. Kind of pounds the zone and generates whiffs. Like, you know, that's kind of a rare combination for an off-speed pitch. Especially if we consider the splitter is going to stick around. I mean, that's going to help if the fastball continues to be not great. Especially we're talking about like platoon splits and stuff for Gilbert, which, you know, kind of showed up a little bit the first 2 seasons, without the splitter. So I think Gilbert's definitely a buy for me at his ADP.
Yep, no, I'm with you. It's if we talk about the other Seattle pitchers, at least the big three, because the two young guys are still going to be very good, but they kind of haven't proven it as much as Gilbert, the next guy we're talking about in Castillo. Gilbert's the discount of the group, so you got that going for you. And you mentioned we said he's got the stuff, and you mentioned command and control. Well, that goes to one George Kirby, who is literally just an amazing can't walk anybody type guy. Like people were betting less than like a half a walk a game props or something like that, and it was working, or 1.5 walks a game, and he's nailing those. And it's ironic to me because last year Kirby and Gilbert were going back to back in drafts because no one knew what to do, how to separate them. Well, now when you just look at the SP landscape and NFBC DCs, it goes Castillo and then Kirby now. Kirby's up there, so they're about 30 picks away from Logan Gilbert. And Kirby, 190 innings, ratios are outstanding. Just strikeouts are down a bit compared to some other guys early in the draft. So, what's your thoughts on Kirby?
Yeah, I know the concern is strikeouts with Kirby, right? So I'm going to kind of lay out the argument for, and I put this in the Facts and Flukes article, kind of lay out the argument for why I think Kirby might be having a little more strikeout upside than we're thinking. I kind of just mentioned Logan Gilbert's slider again, having a high zone rate. George Kirby's was second in zone rate, right? So he's another just like elite control guy, kind of the second lowest ball rate, and just elite, pounds of zone, elite control guy. And so strikeouts might be the concern, but the four seamer has the second highest swing and strike rate among all starting pitchers behind Luis Castillo. So fastball is pretty good. And he didn't use the splitter very much, but he's another kind of, generated a decent chunk of whiffs. I expect that to bump up a little bit. I was trying to look. I think he threw it about 5 or 6% or something last year. So I think there's going to be, a little bit of a bump out for the splitter there for George Kirby, and that's going to help kind of bump up the whiffs there. The hard part is the ADP is just so high, right? So you're kind of paying or banking for that, kind of outcome there. I'm going to throw in a football analogy here, and Bijan Robinson, right? It feels like
that's a great one.
Feels like what we're doing is Bijan Robinson, right? We're paying for this young, talented player, and we're paying this kind of the ceiling price for something we haven't seen yet. But I do think the skills are there for Kirby to take a bump up, right? So in a year from now, there might be some people saying, well, I didn't really see it there, but I think it's there. He's got a really good fastball. The splitter's going to, I think, take a jump here. He just has such a safe floor with that really elite control that I think he's going to give you, what you pay for there. And you're not going to be disappointed.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's a great comp because that's kind of where I get with Kirby. It's if I just want a really, really safe floor with ratios. Okay, cool. I'd love to if you go aggressive in starting pitching early and you get like a Strider, I love pairing it with like a Kirby because now your ratios are just like deadly. And Kirby will get enough strikeouts where you still have two elite strikeout guys in the end type thing because Strider does Strider things. It just depends on how you build it. Basically, you got to get those strikeouts built somewhere else, and you don't have to go aggressive early. There's guys later, but that's with building with Kirby. It's like you said, it's a really fun floor. I just don't know where the ceiling is just yet, but I wouldn't be shocked if he ever found it. I just don't know when he will type scenario.
Yeah,
so, could be good for sure. Bryce Miller, fun Twitter follow these days because he's showing workout after workout, working on the splitter. Like this is Team Splitter now here up in Seattle. They need to make like Baseballism needs to go make T-shirts or something for these guys. Like they can get really creative with the graphics on that. But Bryce Miller, 131 innings last year. If you combine the minors, about 150. So that's beautiful because that means he's pretty much stretched out for today's standards. And you're only paying an ADP of 183 right now. And if he can develop that splitter, I'm no fool. That could be fun. So what are your thoughts on Bryce Miller this year, especially 183?
Yeah, I really like Bryce Miller. A really solid fastball, generates above average swing and strike rate on the four seamer. His sweeping slider has an interesting kind of movement profile. It doesn't necessarily generate a ton of whiffs, or it did not kind of this past year, as one would expect, but it's got a pretty good, movement profile where it could generate a little bit more whiffs. The sweeper kind of really drops a little more than one might imagine. Right now his arsenal, right? So if he's adding the splitter, we've seen all those videos. I feel like watching a new pitch is kind of like best shape of your life, narrative now. So,
very fair.
But again, I like it, right? I like to see guys making some changes, trying to do something differently. So I think, argument one would be, I think the sweeper, generates a little bit more whiffs. Right now he's, kind of susceptible to some platoons, right? He's terrible against lefties. And that's mostly because if he kind of keeps that four seamer slider super right now, he's just gonna, lefties are gonna eat that up. So the splitter or an off-speed pitch is gonna definitely help him kind of balance that out. Even if we use like George Kirby as a comp there, right? Like if he uses the splitter 6 to 8% of the time, It's probably going to be pretty good, and it's probably going to be good enough to, keep lefties off balance, probably have a decent swinging strike rate, even if it's hardly, not used that much. And so I think we're going to see some of those, platoon concerns kind of even out. Again, I feel like Miller is, not the same exact mold because he's probably a little more kind of stuff than George Kirby per se, but I feel like next year we're going to see Bryce Miller's ADP probably being closer, to a top 100 pick or more even, and especially that splitter generates more whiffs and plays up like it should. And again, Miller does have pretty good control there. He's got a high zone rate on several of the pitches, so I think I'm buying in on that AP, especially where it's with him and our next guy here in Bryan Woo.
Yep. Yeah, it's an ADP that you can definitely start taking some chances. You should have a good floor of your top 3, maybe even 4 pitchers by then, depending on how you operate. Like that is a kind of guy that could bring a ceiling that could outplay that ADP in a big way if things click. And then you mentioned Bryan Woo, who I picked up in a lot of places, and I loved him last year. Like there was, all these young pitchers had their hiccups. That was just how young pitchers operate. But as a whole, I liked what we saw from Bryan Woo. He threw about 130 innings, give or take, between the minors and the bigs. We got to remember he came up straight from Double-A last year, so he just went straight to the top, and kind of growing pains or whatever, but still, like I said, did well. ADP's 180. You kind of hinted at him. It sounds like you might be a little into him as well.
Yeah, he has another kind of interesting approach, kind of like Bryce Miller. Bryan Woo uses kind of a fastball heavier approach, almost a little Lance Lynn like, right? He's got 4-seamer, sinker, cutter, kind of accounting for 87% of that arsenal. Again, he has that kind of current arsenal where he might have some challenges against lefties, unless he kind of adds a splitter or bumps up that changeup usage. And so again, it's small sample, but he only threw the changeup like 52 times or something. But if it's not the changeup, it's going to need to be the sinker probably to kind of keep lefties kind of off balance there. If again, I haven't seen if. I know there's a lot of Bryce Miller talk, but I hadn't seen if Bryan Woo's out of a splitter. I mean, even if it wasn't on social media, I imagine
you would imagine he is, since he'd be
yeah,
like, they all are. So you
exactly,
imagine they're talking at least.
yeah. So again, I think, and I mentioned this before, probably in other places, but the Mariners, in my opinion, are a team that I'm kind of trusting from a player development standpoint, pitching standpoint, to make some of those adjustments. So,
Definitely.
if we're seeing some of these things, they're seeing a little bit more in the lab, and I think there'll be a kind of change there in that arsenal in year 2.
Yep. I think it'll be quite interesting to see where he goes. And so it's kind of fun. You have like Castillo at 28, you have Kirby at 33, Gilbert's around 68, and then you have Woo at 180, and I just totally blanked. Miller at 183. So it's like you got this just smorgasbord of outstanding stuff, and you could probably get at least 3 of them. Like you said, you want to draft as many, you could get at least 3.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm going to be mad if I don't leave with at least 2 or 3 in the draft.
You could definitely do that if you do it right. So
yeah.
And the thing is, like, they all had pretty respectable ratios with strikeout upside. They just didn't, like, 1 through 5. You don't find that on many teams. Trust me, I previewed them all. You don't find many that have a 1 through 5 where you're like, I trust all of these guys.
Yeah. I mean, like we've had this from the Dodgers or other teams before, right? Where it's just like, you're not going to go wrong getting a few of them. You might, I think this is the team to do that. So,
and God forbid something happens to one of these 5. We have to look at other options. And like the Giants in the Haniger deal, DeSclafani came over. I wrote about him as the long reliever / 6th man. Do you have any kind of thoughts on him? Because I'm leaving him on the waiver wire or whatever. But yeah.
Yeah. I was trying to look into him a little bit, right? We had some of that streak a few years back with the Reds. It's probably just more a streamer. He had a flexor strain last August, ended his season. I tried to look, some of the metrics, like he's average control, swinging strike rate's about average. Pitch movement profiles don't look like anything jumps off the page. So it's kind of just something that I'm not really going to be paying attention to unless there's some changes that happen that I can't foresee. But just based on the past, he's probably no more than a streamer, like you said. If God forbid, one of the guys gets hurt and has to fill in a few starts and stuff like that. So
Yeah, they picked up Jackson Coar as well, who maybe naively I did or whatever. I know I wasn't alone. Was kind of excited about him at one point in Kansas City. He'd kind of been dealt around a few places now. Is there any interest in him, or is that a strict like let's just kind of wait and see situation?
I mean, call me a fool, but I don't know why I like these former Royals starting pitchers, right? Like,
Yeah,
I mean, Jackson Core, like, control's awful, 40% ball rate. League average is about 36%. But yeah, above average swing and strike rates on the slider and changeup. It's got, really good movement profiles, like just stuff wise. So I think that's something to monitor. I could see the Mariners kind of fixing maybe. I don't like to use Robbie Ray as the
yeah.
person there, but just kind of that guy that just maybe pounds his zone with those pitches and kind of just trusts his stuff there. But probably more a reliever, maybe kind of maybe fills in for Descafani if he's injured, kind of thing. But yeah, just a name to monitor. I think that had some shine, and I wouldn't be surprised if that came out in a small sample with the Mariners. So
All right, you mentioned relievers. Let's go to the bullpen here, where it's a fun mix here. And all the names we have down to talk about, I'm very excited to talk about because I've got shares of most of those, at least 2 out of 3 for sure. Um, but you got some interesting little kind of numbers here on saves over the last few years with the Mariners. So I want you to share those with the crew.
yeah. So I was kind of looking at this. I try to do this a little more with football, and I try to do it with baseball too, right? I think it's good to look at some of these bigger picture metrics, right? Whether it's team level or league wide, and just kind of see if anything's kind of changed. I did a little bit of this too, and I think Jason Collette did a little bit of this a few years back too. Just like, looking at month by month batting average, or just some of these changes that we're kind of seeing with some of the things and league wide, and just seeing, if there's anything significant or not. That's just where I wanted to start, right? I think some of the really good um, places that cover relievers, like Reliever Recon, do a lot of this, where they're really looking at like the team level, kind of higher level save stuff or opportunity stuff instead of just going into the players. I mean, I feel like that's where a lot of us kind of started, is like player, deep dives or whatever.
100%.
But so I just want to kind of put some context here, right? So 2021, Mariners are second in save opportunities, and they had 4 relievers with 5 or more saves. The next season, 2022, they're 26 in save opportunities, and they only had 2 with 5 more saves, and that was Seawald and Munoz. 2023, a little bit better in save opportunities, 18th, and then this past year they had 2 relievers with 10 more saves, and of course that was Seawald and Munoz again. So again, I kind of just somebody keep in mind, maybe they might be about league average in terms of save opportunities, right? And they're probably going to divvy up saves in some shape or form, even without Paul Seawald. So I think that's just a good projecting or forecasting we can do there.
Yeah, I think that's fair. To a couple guys will get some work, which, like you said, we've seen. Let's start with the guy that everyone has as the anointed closer for now, and he's been sharing saves with Seawald the last 2 years. And that's Andres Munoz, and we know when he's out there, he's been pretty darn solid. I think you were saying last year like he would be utilized when they needed strikeouts. He'd come in when they just wanted like a guy that could get outs. It was more of a Seawald situation. Munoz was injured for part of last season, but man, I thought he was older than this. He's only 25, which is pretty crazy to think about. So, what's your thoughts on Andres Munoz right now, who, when you're looking at ADP, has an ADP of 94?
Yeah, I mean, injury is always going to kind of be there with Andres Munoz, right? Because he just throws ridiculously hard. The stuff's really, really good. Just some notes, right? Without Paul Sewald, basically August and beyond, Andres Munoz was 11 out of 13 save chances, 23.3% K minus BB rate, high walk rate, but ball rate's slightly below average, but he's always had some control issues. But just stuff's electric, right? Slider's just ridiculous. Over 24% swing and strike rate. Has the strikeout stuff that we want in a closer. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if, he had, let's say, 18 to 20 saves and then another arm had 8 to 10, right? So, he might be priced up there because probably some of the DC stuff, some of the guys are trying to, drafters are at least trying to lock up a arm that could be safer save option. So it's probably a fair price there. He's probably right in that back end kind of range of like closer ones or whatever that you want to go
Yeah.
for. So I'm trying to look. Yeah, I probably have more concerns about the other guys around him. So he might be kind of that last guy there in that kind of tier of relievers there that I like with the skills for sure. So
One of the last ones you kind of trust in that range. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
I'm kind
Yeah,
of with you there. Yeah, one you at least kind of feel like as a reliever one before you get to that murky water
yeah,
situation.
yeah,
100% with you with Munoz. Very good pitcher. Like it just sucks because in years past we draft him kind of where we're drafting this next guy, who I like to draft this next guy a lot too. And I made maybe a dumb comment at one point in time, but I was like, I wouldn't be shocked if Matt Brash is the saves leader in Seattle for 2024. I think he's that good. But you never know. Nothing wrong with Munoz. So as long as he's healthy, I could see him obviously being the guy. But Brash has an ADP around 251. So he's feels like a guy if you missed out and you want to gamble on some relievers, he seems like a guy I like. But what's your thoughts on Matt Brash?
yeah. I mean, I think it's a good arm to take there. I mean, some could argue it's maybe a little too early, but I think again, if we're expecting some of that reliever trend that the Mariners had, he's probably going to give you 8 to 10 saves, maybe a little more if Munoz gets hurt, right? So he was third in the gamer leverage index behind Munoz and Seawald, so he's going to be in some of those high leverage situations. Slider is just deadly, both sides of play, just really really good. Four seamer has been getting crushed, but he has kind of dropped the usage last year. July was at 44%. It dropped down to 37% in August. Probably not, too significant in September, but it dropped down to like 12.7%. But that's kind of towards the end of the season. He did add a sinker in September. He used it about 15% of the time. Matt Brash, and we bumped up the slider usage in August and September. I was kind of amazed at how much he used the slider in August and September. 53% in August, and then over 64% in September. I mean, when you're a reliever like that and you have a deadly slider, I mean, it's why not use it that much?
Yep.
We see a lot of really good relievers do that. So, I mean, if that's going to be an approach, I mean, and use a sinker to kind of maybe keep some of the hitters off balance a little bit on the other side of the plate. I mean, especially if the four seamer hasn't been great, I kind of like that approach. So he's got the skills that I like there.
Yep. Don't mind that at all. I think he's a definite one to do in DCs. I like a lot. And the last guy, I'll let you introduce this wonderful individual because I'll preface. I've done 13 drafts, DCs, some gladiators. It's probably too many drafts, but I've done some drafts. I think out of the 13 I was looking today, I think I have 4 or 5 of this individual because his ADP is about 700. So it's the last pick basically in drafts. Who am I talking about?
Yeah, Prelander Burrow, right? I mean,
Yep.
if you can't remember who this guy is, you got to remember this guy's name.
Yep.
He had a brief debut last year, and I feel like you might have tagged me or we were messing
Yeah.
around and we're like, hey,
Yep.
he's here. He made it.
He got the call.
He got the call. Electric strikeout stuff. You
Yeah.
watch this guy. I mean, he most people probably saw him when he came out for a little bit. But struggles with command. His ball rate at AA was about 37.5%. Small sample, 22 of his 41 pitchers in the majors are balls, right? So that's not great. But this stuff is just nasty, like especially his slider. I was trying to look at, kind of comps for his slider, just kind of based on the horizontal and vertical movement. And I kind of match it up with, I usually start with movement profiles first, and then maybe I'll see if that kind of matches up with some of the stuff. But Prelander Burrow slider kind of looks like Bryce Miller and Dylan Cease's slider, where it's a hard slider. Um, and it's right around there stuff plus wise. And so I really like Burrow's stuff. And so, again, just a reliever arm. I mean, it's not like we haven't seen, poor control pitchers make it in the majors, insert Dylan Cease, insert Spencer Strider at some point when everybody thought it was going to be a reliever. I'm not trying to say he's going to be that, but I'm saying it's just if you're going to buy into, kind of a high upside arm, just keep an eye on this is the guy to do that.
Yep. I think there's a lot to like there. That's why I'm buying in as a late option. God forbid something happens to Brash or Munoz or something. He'd be a perfect fill in to just if he can get a little more control, he could be a beast. Maybe not the closer this year, but at least put in some ratios and strikeouts and see where things go. Let's talk prospects. The first individual you have down here, I'm very excited to talk about because I was so torn on him. I haven't drafted him anywhere. The first appearance in the bigs was not great for Emerson Hancock, but there's probably still something there. So, what are your thoughts on Emerson Hancock right now?
Yeah, I kind of put him on there. I mean, he's probably one of the better, or more possible, prospect arms to kind of make it up there again after coming up for a few games. I like kind of what he did there in Double A. He, wasn't great. He had a 16.8% K minus VB, 34% ball rate. Just kind of decent, but not mind blowing stuff. Changeup should be pretty solid, and I'll admit I'm a little bit of a sucker for some of these like non-fastballs that are really good, and I think Emerson Hancock has a really good changeup, and so that's a guy that I kind of like, and if he can just get like have some of the other like the fastball and the slider be just decent enough, I think we've got some in there, so I could see him kind of overtaking maybe a spot. I feel like Emerson Hancock's probably not going to be a guy that they're going to want to put into like a Descalfani role, right? They're not going to want to kind of put him in this swingman role. They're probably going to want to be like, if he's going to pitch, he's going to start. So I think keep tabs on him. I don't want to say if he comes up and I want to be blowing a bunch of fab on him, but I think he's a guy that I would be trying to prioritize and take a chance on it there.
Yeah, like what I've seen in my very small samples, again, not a prospect guy here. He reminds me a little bit of a Kirby-ish, where he's not a ton of strikeouts, but might be able to lock in if he get controls to something along that line. That's what I kind of see with Hancock. So,
yeah,
we'll see. We'll see. You have a couple other guys here. Hancock's ADP was around 600 right now. These two individuals are not even being drafted right now, so this is definitely an intriguing one to see for call-ups. You have Zach Deloach and Jonathan Clase. So, what are you seeing in these two guys?
Yeah, Deloach is a guy that kind of just more in some dynasty leagues and stuff. He's definitely kind of interesting. He's got some pretty good power. You can look at some of the AAA data. He's had a 9.8% barrel rate, max EV just under 112 miles per hour. And so he's got some really good. I think he's a lefty. He got some lefty power there. So I think it's a guy that we can pay attention to a little bit. A little pull heavy, not a ton, but again, that could play up in I almost said safe goal, but T-Mobile, right? All these name changes.
It's so ridiculous, but yeah.
So Deloach does have some speed too. He's not like a zero, but he's going to give you like maybe 5 to 10, kind of in a peak scenario. And I try to look at like, thankfully we kind of have access to some like some of the AAA kind of data there, right? Like kind of at least a public available one is like on Prospect Live. They have some of the AAA data, and he doesn't chase often. He's like a 23.6% chase rate. Does struggle a little bit to make contact in the zone, right under 79%. But we could take kind of a passive hitter that is a little more selective, but does hit the ball hard. I mean, we've seen that kind of profile play out. So just a guy to keep an eye on. Yeah, Class A, I mean, speed, right? Who doesn't love speed? We all love stolen bases. He's kind of like one of those toolsy guys, like maybe not so much the ceiling, but Noel V. Marte of the Reds, right? Kind of just a toolsy guy that, we've kind of been dreaming upon, but they traded, Marte away. But Class A's, he's got some of the tools to, be fantasy friendly with the speed. And has, I'd say probably below average power. But again, if a guy's gonna, he's stolen like 55 and 62 bases at multiple levels, like, that should kind of be a guy that's gonna give us some. I think he has like 80 grade speed or something ridiculous, right? So he's a really good athlete, and he's not terrible at getting on base. So, he should kind of be a guy that would be interesting if he does come up.
Yeah, those two bats, especially because we kind of joked earlier about the either the platoon options or the guys on the bench. Like we didn't even talk about for good reasons, like you said, Moore and some others. Like if these kids are playing well in the minors, there's no reason they shouldn't get a shot at times this season if things kind of dictate the need in Seattle. 100%.
Yeah, exactly. If these guys were like the bench platoon options for Luke Raley and Mitch Haniger, I'd be like, sure, let's do this, right? Like,
100%. That's why these are good names. So I'm honestly surprised no one has drafted them yet because like I said, I'm not a prospect guy, but there's enough people in these DCs that we're going 700 and something picks that there's usually some names I've never thought about that get drafted. So I'm quite surprised, honestly, because it actually fits the Mariners' needs right now.
Yeah.
But all right, before we wrap things up, the question I ask every guest that's a fan of the team: what are your expectations for 2024? You still have the Astros in the way, or not in the way, but there. You have the Rangers that just won the whole thing. So what are our thoughts for the Mariners? Because you did make the playoffs, which was a big step.
Yeah, I mean, Josh Hader going to the Astros doesn't really help
No,
in
no,
terms of trying to come back late in games when you have
no.
whatever order, right? Like I don't really care how it plays out, but if it's Hader, Presley, and Brian Abreu closing out the last 3 innings, like that's going to be pretty tough going there to claw back. Rangers, offense is pretty awesome, right? And I think the wild card is just the pitching, but I mean, if they can just get some league average pitching, and just be decent enough, I could see them also making a run again. I'm a very maybe it's pessimistic, realistic, whatever term you want to throw in there. I try to just in general, I try not to get too high, too low about too many things, just kind of stay level headed. So again, reflecting, big picture wise, if you would have told me 5 years ago that they'd be at this point where they're in the playoffs, they've got young talent, I'd be like, I'm all for that, right?
Yep, and that's the way to be in baseball, especially. It feels like out of like all the sports to me is things can literally change on the dumbest things. That all of a sudden you're not even a contender, but your team's actually good. They just didn't work out that year, so like getting too highly invested at the wrong times. Like once they get to the dance, if you want to get involved, okay, that's fair. They're there. They have a chance. The one thing I'll say about the Mariners, and I just like rooting for. I like rooting for a few of these teams, but the Mariners just because I like J Rod, obviously. But you have a great young pitching staff, and that could go a long ways. If all five of those guys can turn into what we all think they can, that's gonna keep the Mariners in the race. Let's put it that way. So that'll be very
Yeah,
interesting.
absolutely. They got at least three guys that we've seen, give you, workhorse type, roles and innings and quality stuff. And yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. I mean, that's where it's fun, right? Like a lot of
Yep.
times we're going to go ballpark and see some of the pitching matchups,
Big
and
time. Yeah,
happy to see some of that go out of game. So
for sure. All right, before we sign off, my friend, remind everybody where they can find you, where they can find your work. You can promote your football work too, whatever you got. Throw it all out there.
yeah. Thanks for having me again, Bubba. I really
Oh,
appreciate it. Thanks for being
always.
flexible. And yeah, happy to be on here, talk Mariners or baseball in general. Like you said, I'm kind of ramping up my fantasy baseball content, do facts and flukes with Baseball HQ. Last year, I did the Arsenal report as well, just kind of looking at different pitchers and breaking down their arsenal through a RotoWire article as well. Kind of less so there, just kind of based on time and life.
Yep.
But most of my football works to the 33rd team. I do a little bit of the RotoViz as well. And yeah, as you well, I'm a little bit of a sicko, and I've been dabbling into some running back prospects for college football. And so, this is a hobby and this is fun, and just trying
Yep.
to, do a little bit for fun here and there. And yeah, appreciate you having me on. And
Hey, your prospect sickoness is my golf sickoness. Like I do golf stuff when we're all still doing everything else. So we
golf
all have
DFS, yeah.
we all have our little thing, don't you? Like I literally have golf on TV right now while we're talking about this. So
One of these days I gotta pick your brain. I mean, I love golf, like just playing for fun, right?
yeah,
But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like I need to pick your brain on
I
understanding
got I got
fantasy
Bloom.
golf a little more.
Bloomfield got into it for the first time this year. It's very entertaining. I get a lot of texts, or not a lot. I get texts once in a while, and he's mad that I got him into this. Let's put it that way. But I think it's fun. It's fun if you like watching golf. If you don't like to watch golf, it's probably not fun to play. That's all I'll say. But yeah,
Yeah,
baby steps. Playing golf is great, like you said. So
yeah,
it all goes together. But thanks for joining me, my friend. Always fun, and we'll chat again sometime.
yeah, for sure. Thanks a lot.
All right, everybody, make sure y'all follow Corbin on Twitter at Corbin_Young21. And this was Bench with Bubba, episode 636, your Seattle Mariners team preview. Catch y'all next time.